First thing to keep in mind about the theory of evolution is that it is an extension of the theory of natural selection, which has been more or less proven. Natural selection is the concept that the stronger assets that are born into a birth cycle, say for example a pig has 6 babies and one of them has a snout that's a little bit longer that can reach farther down towards roots or something, that snout's going to be passed on. This sort of idea is very basic and easily understood because we see such a vast divergence amongst any given species that no two offspring that are born to the same mother and father are going to be exactly the same. But evolution says that these divergence in the offspring eventually leads to other species. Now, what isn't explained in evolution is the fact that the most common picture and chart that we know of evolution is that of the evolution of man out of ape. And we see how the ape builds up into, it's usually 6 or 7 different pictures in the chart that shows the progress. But what it doesn't explain in evolution is what I call the burnt bridge phenomenon. And this is in every lineage of evolution that's shown. The fact that the 5 different beings that are alleged to have come in between the ape and the man are all gone. Now, if this happened due to natural selection, the concept is that each one of these, Homo erectus, Neanderthal man, all of these were progressions upon the ape. Now, if each of these came from natural selection due to the fact that they were an improvement upon the ape, then why did they cease to exist and the ape still thrives, as does man? But that's what I call the burnt bridge. The lineage in between the two is gone. Now, the first argument that most would pose to that is that there's skeletal proof of that. What people don't, a lot of people haven't looked into the fact that bone deteriorates in the ground on average in about 20 years. So the idea that there's 200,000-year-old bones is not a reality. There are fossils that are said to be 200,000 years old. And this is done not through carbon dating, but through half cycles of radiation dating. Now, there have been bone fragments that are said to be of this or that, but the idea that there's a whole skull is not the case. There are no whole Homo erectus skulls. That's just not a reality. There's fragments that people have generated. They're conceptual. Now, why would anybody say it's so if it's not? Well, first of all, once evolution, the theory of evolution that Charles Darwin came up with, was based on looking at an orangutan and how similar it is to man, and then within his imagination, he used the idea of natural selection, had evolved into a whole new species. Now, there's been several people that have challenged that. He actually based his theory on a paper written by Mr. Wallace, who later renounced his own theory of evolution that preceded Charles Darwin's, because of the fact that this speech is never explained in that. And Noam Chomsky theorized that there's a part in the brain that evolved that's specifically for speech, but this part of the brain has never been pinpointed or found. So this burnt bridge phenomenon is in more preposterous concepts that a wolf came from the whale. This whole lineage from the whale to the walrus up to the canine has all these very many burnt bridges. Now, if each of these points of natural selection were an improvement in survival skills, then why do they always disappear? Why is that burnt bridge always there? Now, the general idea is that anybody who challenges the theory of evolution does so on the fact that it is a religious argument, and all religious arguments are by non-religious people or people without faith are thought to be generally the idea that science is opposed, that religion is opposed to science. But yet what we know the most, the people who did the most studies in originally determining natural selection were monks. And they did so based on the concept that mankind has been given dominion over the animals and the plants. And with these appendages and with the knowledge that we have taken dominion over the animals and the plants. And we've bred domestic creatures such as cows and chickens. All these that we see, we've bred out of wild animals. Even the domestic dog, called Canine domesticus, came from Canine carnivorus, the wolf. Yet a Canine carnivorus can still interbreed with Canine domesticus. Those are not wholly different species that have evolved. These are what I would call supernatural selections, being as mankind has intentionally not so much picked based on survival, but based on how well their attributes can contribute to mankind's attributes. The cow wouldn't survive as well in the wild as the wildebeest or the buffalo, yet it's better suited for mankind's purposes to stay within the fence that we want to keep it in. And as we know, a cow can interbreed with a buffalo. As much as different as they look, they are not wholly different beings that have been created out of another species. So there's a broad range of this. Now, what then, if not evolution, could possibly be responsible for what we see in all the different species and the divergence among species and all the way up to mankind? Well, my general insight on this came from the fact that on August 10th, 1997, while in the arid lands of California, west of San Francisco, in what was where vegetation's grown, because of irrigation, however, I was hitchhiking, and the guy who picked me up hitchhiking had been drinking, so I had him drop me off in the middle of nowhere because I didn't want to ride with him anymore. It was a very clear night, and late that night when looking up, I suddenly saw a huge triangle overhead. My first thought was it was a stealth bomber because of its shape. But I've seen jets fly over before, and then right after seeing the jet, when you see a jet fly over, a low-flying jet, you hear the sound right after, and no sound came after. And then as the triangle was moving much more slowly than it would have had it been a low-flying jet, and I saw the shape as it gets off away from me go from being the triangle it was when it was directly above the head to a square as it goes off in the distance. And I realized it was a pyramid-shaped vessel. There was no lights on it whatsoever. It was just a black shape that blocked out the sky. And I realized it was flying tip point. That's why it looked like a triangle. Tip in the front, the base in the back, tip first as it flew. And as it went off in the distance, I was seeing the base. That made me totally rethink everything I knew about Earth, mankind, and the concept of higher beings. So the postulates I've come up have originated from that. Now, as far as what could explain that diverse range of species is a form of creationism. And the fact that I, rereading biblical text after this and reading about the Garden of Eden, how it talks that the Garden of Eden, man was created inside of the Garden of Eden, as with inside something. And it's said that when Adam and Eve were sent out of the Garden of Eden, there was an angel with a sword of flame that turned in every direction and wouldn't allow them back in. Now, the idea of a sword of flame sounds like magic, and for centuries, even millennium, it still sounds like magic unless you consider the idea of a laser. And given a primitive vocabulary where you don't have the term laser or the idea of the technology that could create a laser, then a sword of flame seems very reasonable usage of words that you did have to explain something that's such. A sword being something that could cut something in half, and flame being the hot heat of radiation that would be contained in a laser. So there gives me the concept, knowing that there is a higher technology that we don't understand, makes me believe that there are beings that have that technology that probably are very much in appearance like us, if not even the same, although I imagine there is some difference, because I do believe that apes are part of our parental lineage that we were created out of, because there is such a similarity. So I think that what we have always termed, what in ancient times was termed angels, being from heaven, which in primitive concept, before science has definitely evolved. Before science had evolved into what it is today, the concept that everything that was high up overhead was in heaven. And so a being that came down that would be a higher being, an angel was a perfectly logical term, but perhaps a better term than the concept, the scary, frightful terms that we have of aliens that would make us want to combat these beings. So, given that thought, and looking at where we are progressing ourselves in science and what we may be able to do eventually with genetics, we may be able to make species that cannot now interbreed possibly be able to interbreed. So the idea that a higher being already has that technology, if it can make something the size of the Great Pyramid of Egypt actually fly, then it's without any fumes behind it, without any sound, then the possibilities of what else it can do are limitless. And I know this is asking you to swallow a whole lot of things that you're not prepared to now, but I do believe in time, as more things come to light, these early seeds of thought will become more clear. And with that, I will go on to say that as far as thinking that religion has been in contrast with science overlooks the fact that Gregory Mendel studied natural selection and supernatural selection, whatever you would say, to a great degree, that we have the tomatoes and the strawberries. We still have wild strawberries out there. You can still find them. And they're tiny, but they're not like the big juicy strawberries that are harvested from a garden under the care of a human being. Other examples of that I think is proof of creationism, that there was already consciousness put in place in its inception, is the fact that mankind has been given beasts of burden that we can ride upon that are suitable for many different terrains. We have horses that can ride over the prairies. We have donkeys that can go into treacherous paths down into gullies, and we have camels that can go across the desert. It seems that those species that with backs the way they are so strong, they're able to self-replicate. The fuel that they take is already gathered as they travel across the land. The water and the grain, the grass that they eat as they go is already there. We don't have to provide the fuel for these things. So it's such a perfect, to think that all this came from the chaotic universe that a lot of people tend to believe that all of the universe is. It's just one great big chaotic thing, that life is just a fluke that just happened. But yet, why then almost everything that we see when we look out the window is a very complex system of an organization of cells, and we see mostly amazing things that we cannot create. Mankind cannot create an ant. We cannot create a butterfly. We can create robotic things that simulate these things, but yet these robotic things aren't self-replicating. These robotic things aren't able to gather their own fuel. So what I see are machinery that is superior to machinery to any machinery man has created. Ourselves being the most amazing one here on this planet. In a way, although the fact that an eagle can fly is, obviously a great, amazing thing that mankind cannot do without the help of, we've used planes. Is it not possible that there is a great flexibility in species? Could it be possible that we could selectively breed an eagle the size that we could get on its back and fly? Is that preposterous? Is it also that preposterous? We've seen at SeaWorld people's ability to ride whales in short distances. Is it possible that we could learn to ride great whales across the ocean? Is it possible that these things were already put here for us to figure out and learn from? That's where I'll conclude this idea today. Thank you. Bye.